I want to welcome Kristina back to visiting us at UCLA, and we're looking forward to her talk. Why good ideas are hard to find, how algorithms and human biases interact to constrain discovery. Okay.
Thank you, Andrea. Turn this up. I can turn this off now. All right. Thanks. It's an honor to be here, and actually, the honor is actually unexpectedly bigger honor, because when I was looking into the history of the Marshak colloquiums, this is Jacob Marshak, who was actually born in 1898 in Kiev. I found this old-timey photograph from the period. This is the monument to Bogdan Khmelnytsky, Ukrainian national hero. You can't actually see, but one of his arms is extended, and if you walk down the street where he's pointing, you'd get to the house where I was born and spent the first 12 years of my life. So I actually kind of treasure this kind of connection to this Marshak colloquium series. All right, so I'm going to kind of combine right now a couple of things. I have very diverse research interests, but I try to bring them all together under this rubric, how do humans find information? If you go back to Isaac Newton saying, if I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants. Back in Newton's times, like early 1700s, it was easy to see the giants. There weren't too many people around, right? But as we have actually progressed in time, things have changed. Until actually all through the 20th century, it was still possible to keep up with all the good ideas that people were writing. But then the web happened, and the amount of information started growing exponentially fast. And then we built some tools to help us, like Google's PageRank basically revolutionized the field, and actually why got me into computer science in the first place. Then we developed, then social media came about in 2005. We developed algorithms to mine all this social behavioral data to help us find information. We developed, that's what I'll be talking about a lot. And now we are actually moving to the age of AI that is further trying to help us find information. But I'm going to talk about the problems that kind of exist and some of my work that highlights these problems. So first about algorithms. So algorithms are running or maybe ruining your lives right now, our lives. And I started like 15 years ago studying like crowdsourcing algorithms. The type of algorithms that were deployed in sites like Netflix, Amazon, Reddit, all the social media sites, for example, use these algorithms to help people find good information. So these are crowdsourcing algorithms. They aggregate decisions, choices of many, many people to rank information, to help you find things that are noteworthy. So this is what's known as the wisdom of crowds that was very buzzy about 20 years ago. So the belief is if you used Stack Overflow to look for answers to programming questions, this is what they used. They had this slogan, quality answers float to the top because of the choices many people are making. Then algorithms develop more personalization. For example, they recommend things that you personally would like because they learned your interest, like movie and product recommendations. And of course, now we have AI, we have chatbots that answer questions directly. Okay, so that's what algorithms are doing. Algorithms interact with people, but people are not perfect. People are flawed. People are biased, and that's why I have cognitive scientists, a psychologist sitting here, because I'm fascinated with that as well. So people can't process all the information because they just don't have enough bandwidth for that. That's the concept called bounded rationality that Herbert Simon introduced. So constraints of available time, information, and cognitive capacity limit our ability to make rational decisions. Then, like in the 1970s, Tversky and Kahneman came about that said that people, because we can't process all information, we have developed certain mental shortcuts to help us make quick and easy decisions at a cost, of course. But the cost is these decisions are less accurate, but they allow us to focus our limited resources to the most salient information. And of course, when these heuristics are applied in the social domain to social beings, applied to people, they become stereotypes or implicit biases that people hold about other people. So these cognitive biases systematically skew our decisions, including decisions we make about what information to pay attention to, what papers to read, who to cite, who to collaborate with, etc. And the rest of my talk is going to be actually about the consequences of these feedback loops when these algorithms interact with biased individual decisions. They create feedback loop. But feedback loop, to people who are not physicists here, who maybe haven't heard about it, feedback loop is a dynamical process in which outputs of a system are fed back into the system inputs, influencing future outputs. So the system is constantly like aggregating decisions have been biased based on what the system itself provided, and it goes on and on. And what is one of the consequences of feedback loops? And if the what? Blow up, right? They're unstable, and they amplify biases. And I'm going to be talking about these three types of undesirable outcomes of these unstable feedback loops, which are inequality. They produce winner-take-all dynamics, where few get a lot, but most get very, very little. Unpredictability, why it is hard to predict who the good ideas or who the good people will be in the future. And also what's of particular interest to me, particularly this times, also unfairness, inequities that arise as a consequence of the feedback loops. How small differences can blow up to be large disparities. All right, so first part will be, so I'll talk about two lines of research, so discovering good ideas and discovering good people. So first, in discovering good information online, I will talk about how cognitive biases interact with ranking algorithms in online systems to affect discovery. What kind of cognitive biases are we talking about? Well, actually, the one I've spent most of my time studying is like position bias. It's well known that information that's on top of a web page gets more attention. You can see this in this heat map of eye tracking. Not my work. This is just, with somebody tracked what do people look at when they look at the web page. And you can see like in kind of redder means more time spent dwelling on the top of a web page. People in general, at least in our culture, Western culture, at least from left to right, top to bottom, they spend more time examining what's on the top of the page. Oops. I hope it's okay. In addition to that, there's also social influence. People pay attention to the choices of other people. I like to say, like, if everybody got up, followed Andrea out of this room, I would probably also run afterwards, everybody. But there are also hundreds of other biases that affect what we pay attention to. And these companies, like online companies, they exploit that to get you to pay attention to a few different things. And of course, this type of biases will, of course, interact with the way algorithms rank content. How much information how information is presented affects how much attention it receives. So everybody knows that in Google search page, Google results, people pay attention to the first top three. Nobody looks past that. Social media companies like Twitter and others used to allow people to rank content in chronological order, most recent up on top. They actually, but also offer popularity-based ranking to see what is most popular items. That's kind of by default. So they aggregate decisions of many people to rank items to allow this on top, and to good quality items to get to the top where they'll receive more attention. And I'm going to talk about, actually, I'm mocking up a web page where it's been ranked like this. And you can see actually how this ranking will interact with people's propensity to pay attention to what's on top. And there was actually a really good, the seminal study, Music Lab study, that shows that it produces unstable outcomes that I keep talking about, even it's a 20-year-old study. So this is a study was done by Selganik, Watson-Dodds. They wanted actually to explain why do some items, in cultural markets, for example, among books, why do some books become bestsellers, but most are duds? Why do some songs become hits, but most are not? So they conducted very careful controlled experiments to understand this dynamics of popularity in cultural markets. So I will explain it because actually it inspired our own approach and explains why things, how undesirable outcomes can happen. So participants were asked to, given a list of about 50 songs, and they were asked to listen to the songs and download the ones that they liked. Right? But participants, unknown to them, were assigned to two different conditions. In the control condition, people saw different songs, the same songs, but ranked in different random order each time. Nothing about popularity was shown. And in popularity condition, they were shown songs that were ranked by how many downloads they have received, by their popularity. Okay? And they defined basically popularity is the share of all downloads the song receives, kind of song's market share, is it popularity? And there was something about quality, which you can actually determine the quality of songs by their popularity in the control condition. And what this experiment showed actually that this type of ranking songs by popularity creates this winner-take-all dynamics where few songs become very, very popular, but most songs don't. How can you measure this winner-take-all type distribution? That's actually Gini coefficient of inequality. Gini coefficient is just one number that measures how is market share distributed across like a sequence of items. If everybody has the same market share, Gini is 0. If one song has all the market share, 100%, and the rest have nothing, Gini coefficient is 1. So you can see even in the control condition, there's some inequality. Gini is low because songs have different quality, right? So some are better than others. But when you actually rank things by popularity, suddenly the Gini inequality grows. It becomes very unequal. For your kind of comparison, the Gini inequality of wealth distribution in the United States is around 0.4. So there was even more inequality in this condition. And also, it was hard to predict who will become most popular next time you run an experiment. They could run the same experiment over and over again. Unpredictability in this, when things were ranked, was really high. Okay, so this was actually a very interesting study. We ran our own experiments multiple times. You see many different papers we wrote about this. We could manipulate the strength of bias. We can actually show that we can actually get the same type of outcomes, even if you don't show how many downloads the song received, without showing any social signals. You can still have the same outcome. You can manipulate item quality with this as well. We studied subjective versus objective decisions. You measured outcomes, final popularity, and you basically see, you can actually manipulate bias. For example, you can order things by recency. You'll get some inequality. Once you introduce social signals, you kind of strengthen bias. You get more inequality. You can actually control inequality across different topics until this is the most important plot, actually. This is the phase diagram of potential outcomes. And it shows that in some regimes, when you can tell quality, when you easily know what are the good items, the best items will become most popular when it's ranked by algorithms. But only when you can see, clearly see quality difference, and as long as the bias is not too high. When you increase the bias, then you get in this unstable regime where the best item, highest quality item, is not guaranteed to become most popular, right? So this is the ranking stability. These algorithms that are aggregating many choices people are making, they can actually make systems that are suboptimal, that don't float the best content to the top. Okay, so this was about, but this is low stakes, who cares? Let's talk about a higher stakes case. How do we find good people, good scientists, scientific giants? How do we discover giants? And here I'm going to basically, why are good women scientists are hard to find? And we have, this is, for example, the picture of all 4 historically, over the entire history of Nobel Prize, 4 female physics Nobel laureates, including UCLA's very own Andrea Ghez. But basically, practically, I'm going to offend a mathematician, but basically, the number of women Nobelists is practically 0, approximately 0. It's 1.8% is closer to 0 than anything else. Sure. So it's hard to study. But let's study National Academy of Sciences, of which Andrea Bertozzi is a member. So I think actually there's a lesson in UCLA, hire people named Andrea. So National Academy of Sciences was established by the Act of Congress in 19th century. And it is one of the oldest professional scientific organizations. So members are elected by their peers for outstanding contributions to science. And there are enough women in the sample so I can actually do analysis of this. So women actually represent about 20% of of members. Actually, we only looked at these disciplines. We actually scraped their site, got the names of all 800 members, and looked at their gender. And you can see the trends over time. So things have been going. Membership, women are being elected, but still trailing men. And there's also large disparity across different fields, right? Psychology is closest to parity, but other fields are far worse, okay? So I'm going to study actually why don't women get Nobel Prize win or get recognized? I'm going to look at scientific recognition. And how do we measure scientific recognition? Everybody, all the scientists here know they're increasing their H index, but we basically measure them through citations. But I'm actually talking about different types of citations. Usually people talk about paper citations. I'm going to talk about author citation networks. Who pays attention to whom? So for example, I'm going to construct for all my National Academy of Sciences members, I'm going to construct a network of all the authors, like basically their peer network. All the authors who cited them, all the authors who they cited, and all the connections between them, creating the ego network. In case you were interested, this is what actually this author citation ego networks look like, but I could only use psychologists because their networks tend to be smaller, so I can visualize them. Make sense of these plots, they're just lots of circles.
Also bias in favor of people in universities that don't have a lot of NIS nowadays.
Right.
They're trying to
diversify. All right, so these are, it's hard to study networks. So instead of networks, we just condense network information to some numeric features which we can measure on these different ego networks for different scientists and can compare them. So, this is the list of all the features. There's some structural features. There's some, how many people cite you, how many people you cited, what is the average degree, what is the shortest path, what is the density of edges compared to expected edges, lots, number of communities. Basically, whatever features we could think of, we set them to measure them, and then we can compare them for men and women authors. And looks like many of these network features of these ego networks, are significantly different between men and women. I'm highlighting with stars, I'm highlighting features like shortest average degree, actually most interesting clustering. So for example, clustering, you can see women's clustering is meaning they're within denser networks. The people who cite them also cite each other, tend to cite each other. Women also happen to have more women within their ego networks.
That's the one bar that looks really odd. Well, maybe
clustering, that's right.
Okay, you're right.
Yeah. Yes, and ego, like ego mutual edges, that's right. They reciprocate. Mutual means like they tend to cite people who cite them more than men do.
Oh, that's interesting.
In fact, these features are so different between men and women that we can actually just take the network and look at its features and predict the gender of the ego whose network it is. So we can actually predict it with AUC. It's like score is like 78%, basically. Yeah, not bad at all. Exactly. Oops. Wait, hold on. Oh, this is not. But we can also divide National Academy of Sciences members based on the prestige of their affiliation into top 100 versus everybody else. But if we divide them prestige, there are also some differences, including this, like very few of those differences are significant. And we cannot predict the prestige of their affiliation from the structure of the network better than chance at all. It's basically like gender is predictable, prestige is not. So the question is why? Why is citation networks, why citations so gendered, contain this gender information. And I trace it all to this guy, the Robert Merton, who, yeah, this gives me a great view of people struggling to get in. That's okay, like person already. So this is Robert Merton, who established this fundamental law of how people cite, and it's actually called the first law of the science of science. And he said that scientists who are already well known tend to receive more credit and recognition for their contributions than lesser known scientists, even when their work is of similar quality. So this is the very fundamental idea. It has many different names in many different fields. You might have heard it like rich get richer effect, or here it's called the Matthew effect. That's what he called it in this paper. Also called advantage begets advantage, so we can call it cumulative advantage. It's also network science. Actually, it's called preferential attachment that governs the growth of networks like the web or the internet. And so cumulative advantage exists in citations. And here I'm going to, I'm hand waving right now, but I think there's very good research to back this up. So suppose a paper gets published, right? This paper gets cited over time. But then each new citation, each new paper that cites it creates a path for somebody else to discover your red paper and cite it, right? So you can actually, and now we also have search engines that, like Google Scholar, that analyze citation structure. And so the more citations your paper receives, the more citations it will get in the future. So this is, again, this is a feedback loop. So this is a feedback, cumulative advantage is kind of social algorithm, and it interacts with biased individual decisions to cite, creating a feedback loop with negative consequences, such as, it will amplify small differences in individual citation preferences. So if you're biased to cite people from prestigious institutions, for example, cumulative advantage is happy to amplify that, to create a larger disparity where more share of attention goes to people from more prestigious affiliations. Okay? And creates inequalities, and it creates unfairness. So first about actually inequalities, and this is, papers from Barabasi from a while back and Nielsen a few years ago. Inequality is growing in science. If you look at the share of citations the top papers receive, if you look at top, the cream of the crop, top 1% of all cited papers, the share of citations they receive has gone from like 3 to 4% back in 1990, before the web, to actually like 50, almost 20%, in the most recent days. That's papers, also authors. If you looked at the most cited authors, the share of citations going to the top 1% of most cited authors has also grown systematically over the years. So there's growing inequality in science. Beyond growing inequality, there's also disparities. And I'm going to be talking mostly about gender disparity and prestige disparity. So first, let's talk about gender disparity. And this is a visualization of a very small, extracted from a very large bibliographic graph. So this is, each dot here is an author in the field of management science who is partitioned by gender. So women are color-coded to be cognitively congruent with our expectations. Red are women, blue are men. So this is just but you should, and this is links between them are actually citation links, and the link inherits the color of the author being cited. Right, so blue means people are citing men. Again, this is just a small subgraph taken out of the large OpenAlex bibliographic database. So we see actually, right, it looks blue. Overall, it looks blue, so men are getting more cited, but how do we quantify that? And also, like, the usual response is like, oh, it's because women are minority, that's why it's happening. I'll show you why it's not the case. But how do we quantify it? Well, similar way as I was talking before, I'm going to quantify, kind of define this notion known as the power of the red group. How many citations, how many people cite red authors, normalized by how many people they cite. Because maybe more people cite you because you write more papers. So normalizing kind of by that, you divide by how many people you cite. So you have that ratio Number of authors who cite the red group divided by number of authors who are cited by the red group. You do the same thing for the blue group, and it comes to this ratio. You call it the gender disparity. Just the power of the red group divided by power of the if two groups, they have the same power, the disparity ratio will be 1. If more.
You're basically doing it as two-dimensionless measures, and then you're taking the ratio.
The ratio, that's right. Two-dimensional. So if red gets more people citing red proportionally compared to how many people they cite, then overall the ratio is greater than 1. Women, right, okay. So let's go back to our data and actually see what those ratios are over time. Okay, so that's showing the number, kind of power disparity, gender disparity in citations over time. But the first thing you notice is actually all the lines are in the blue regime, meaning below 1, which means that women get disproportionately less attention to their work than men do. So one of the observations, like psychology has the most parity. So psychology is also the field that has most parity in terms of representation as well. It's almost 50% women. And you notice also the worst fields that was most disparity are like political science, economics. Economics in general is very toxic. Maybe I can't say it online. Okay, so this is partitioned by gender. But we like to, for comparison, we also like to flip it around, partition now by prestige. So now the red groups that are minor, same people as before, but now we are coloring them based on prestige of their affiliation. So whether they belong in the top 100 by Times Higher Education ranking or everybody else. So red is a minority. Just like women were a minority, red is a minority. So yet the graph looks red, right? The links are red. So minority size alone does not explain the disparity. So here's even a stranger graph. All right, so there's disparity, but now we can actually redefine what it means to be elite. Let's pretend we can redefine what instead of top 100, which is right here, we can say, oh, let's look at the top 50 and everybody else, top 25 and everybody else, top 10 and everybody else, and look at citation networks and disparity. Lo and behold, in some fields like management science and economics, amount of this power disparity in citation grows as you become like more exclusive, more and more exclusive, right? So this is what we know is called elitism in science. So fields like economics, management are very, very elitist. And the fields like, so this is psychology, and also actually physics is actually our least elitist.
That's interesting.
And actually, if you know about the hiring processes in this place, like economics has really strange hiring process. They only write one paper, each student writes, and they're hired based on this one paper they write as a sole author. And so how do you know who to hire? It's like such a subjective decision. Whereas in physics and psychology as well, it's typical for people to go through postdocs before they get hired for their prestige. So the decisions are far less subjective, subject to implicit bias, social bias. And I think this kind of explains these types of disparities that you can measure on a game. All right, so this is the empirical observations. But since this is actually mathematics talk, we actually did construct a mathematical model to explain growing citation networks and try to reproduce these observations. And I'm going to walk you through this. This was all work of my brilliant collaborator, Budika Nedesinger, so all the credit goes to him. But so he came up with this mathematical model that has, imagine you have a citation network. How does it grow? Well, it grows due to like new authors, for example, can arrive. And new author can be cite an existing author. Event number 2 that can arise, and a new author arrives and then is cited by existing author, maybe like, private communication, something like this, like new author becomes known to the system. Or, which is far more common, you have a citation network, and a new link arises between existing authors, right? 3 types of events that happen. And he modeled this as probabilities of growing, so each link will arise, parameterized by this. There's class imbalance, so one group is a minority, so when author arrives, it's given a color, red or blue. Red is like minority and blue. It has cumulative advantage, kind of preferential attachment. Authors who are cited more will get more citations, and authors who are more active will give more citations. And also it has these implicit or gender stereotypes or implicit biases, which is the preferences to cite. How likely are authors to cite members of their own group or members of the other group? So these 3 numbers are in this, and I wasn't going to show the equations, but they exist. They parameterize, there's probabilities, and he actually solved this. And this actually has the steady state solution that you can solve. And you can actually calculate after you, starting with some initial conditions, you actually evolve this, you have the final state, you can compute the disparities, citation disparity in the final state. And there's many different cases, of course. I'm going to walk you through some of them. So when the blue group, by which we can be men or can be every non-elite authors, when the blue group is unbiased in who they cite, but the red group, actually the x-axis here showing the citation biases of the red group. So to the right, they prefer to cite red. To the left, they prefer to cite blue authors. But when both groups, when red isn't biased and blue isn't biased, basically there's no disparity. It's equal to 1, right? And then I think I animated this, like as you increase the preference to cite the red authors, then red will get an advantage. When you increase the preference to cite blue authors, then blue will get advantage, okay. And actually each of these lines is actually for different share size of the minority group, or size of the red group, I should say. It goes from 10%, okay. So this happens when blue is unbiased. When blue is biased, when blue prefers to cite red authors, you actually get different types of the disparity as a function of the biases of the red group. So this plot actually looks like the prestige-based plot, basically. So blue group, which is everybody else, prefers to cite red elites. I'll show you the numbers. Okay. And in the other regime, when blue prefers to cite blue like to cite their own self. And now if you look at no matter whether red group prefers to cite blue, well, it actually gives a lot of power. There's a lot of huge disadvantage, disparity in favor of the blue. Okay, blue has advantage. But there's also an interesting consequence of this. As I told you, each line is for different size with the red group. It actually turns out as you basically increase the size of the red group, you hire more women, for example. You can actually, under some conditions, you can actually increase the disadvantage, the disparity. You can give more advantage to men. And what are those conditions? Well, if men like to cite, or for example, even if men are unbiased, but if women, the red group, like to cite men, then it will give men more advantage. In this situation as well, as it goes, like as you hire more women, and then their kind of advantage decreases. And this is another maybe difficult to analyze, to understand this, but this is actually, you go back to the data and measure citation preferences from the data. Who does, within this OpenAlex data set, who do men and women prefer to cite? This is this plot. So this is for the, yes. So basically, except for computer science, actually, and psychology, where women kind of pay attention to other women, this is unbiased line. So they're actually to the right of so this is showing the red group bias. So these plots are like prefer to cite in those fields. Women prefer to cite women. This y-axis is giving preferences of the blue group. So for men, for example, it would be they're always homophilic. Men, they're above the 0.5 unbiased line. So men, in all these fields, men prefer to cite men, in all of the fields we looked at. In all fields except for computer science psychology, we also prefer to cite men, but in computer science psychology, women tend to cite women. If you look at affiliation-based partitioning, you're always in a regime where majority, like non-elite authors, are below the 0.5 line. So non-elite authors like to cite the other group, which is the elite authors. And the elite authors, the red group are the elite authors, they like to cite themselves. And the fields that are most biased are computer science, economics, and management science. Okay, so this is what we measure actually from data. So we measure these preferences to cite, and but now if we measure these preferences and we plug them back into the model and then compare what the model predicts for the disparity, citations disparity, power disparity, that is the y-axis, to what we measure based on completely different method, just counting links, which is the x-axis here, you can see mostly it falls on this y is equal to x line. So there's good agreement between models' predictions and what we measure in real life data. So mathematics works, yes. All right, so my talk was actually trying to understand the world, trying to show you how now these days I kind of look at the world through this dynamical systems perspective, especially looking at how people interact with algorithms, because that's what I'm a computer scientist, that's what interests me. But algorithms are everywhere in our lives. They touch everything, like from our, entertainment and shopping things, like civic discourse. Big focus of my work right now is like online discourse in the political domain, scientific research, and also AI chatbots. We now, we are entrusting our feelings, ourselves to AI algorithms right now. They're everywhere. But often these interactions actually create these feedback loops that will affect us. Our behavior, algorithms are learning from our behavior, and then they're telling us what to do, and then they learn more on our behavior. This is a feedback loop. It can often have harmful consequences, some of which are highlighted, but also can impact how we discover and build on good ideas to create progress in society. And my research right now is actually looking at all these other type of dynamical systems that can arise. So we're looking at social media recommendations that create echo chambers and filter bubbles, social link recommendations. How do people find their own people within online communities? Can lead to online radicalization, can lead to mental health harms, like psychopathologies. I'm studying eating disorders and how people might self-radicalize into having psychopathologies. And of course, also of interest right now, human AI chatbot interactions. People developing emotional attachment because of the feedback loops in the emotional responses of humans to chatbots. And of course, science as well is not immune to the same dynamic processes that are going on in the rest of the lives. All right, and this was a very relevant talk, but of course I have to give due credit to where credit is due, which is my collaborator. All right, so thank you all. Thank you, God. Thank you for your attention.